Hi, I'm Julia Bruton. This is about We Are Woman, a podcast exploring female and new aspects on the topic of VR.
Hi, everyone. I'm sitting here today with Celine Tricart. Actually, we're doing a Zoom call because Celine is right now in LA and I am in Berlin. Celine, how are you? How is your day so far?
It's very good, thank you. And I'm very happy to be participating in that podcast. So thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so excited too to talk to you today. As usual, we always start with the background of our guests and the question how that background kind of led you to being active and creative in VR right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Celine?
Yeah, sure thing. So I am originally from France, and my whole life I always wanted to be a storyteller. So I'm mostly passionate about telling stories and creating emotion in people. So when I was little, I wanted to be a writer. So I wrote a book with my best friend at 12 years old or something. We tried to get it published, but it didn't work. And then I got really passionate about film. So I went to a film school in Paris. And that was my original career, actually. It was the film industry. So I worked a little bit in France, but because I was specialized in new technologies, because I've always been passionate about technology and how it can really enhance storytelling, not just technology for technology, but in a way that can bring the language of storytelling to new realms. And so back in the days, I was an expert in the 3D technology. You know, when you put glasses and you go see movies and they are in 3 dimensions. So that was what I was doing. I was working on movies, dealing with the 3D cameras and making sure everything was working fine and designing the 3D, the depth, like how deep do we want that shot to be? Do you want the volumes to be round or flat, etc., etc.? So that's the reason why I moved to Los Angeles 12 years ago now, because I was working on a lot of American movies. There's not that many French movies that were shot in 3D back in the days. So I moved to LA and I worked on really big movies such as two Transformers movie from Michael Bay. And then I went on working TV. I worked on the series Westworld by HBO. And so back in the days, the people who were working in the 3D world, we knew about VR. Like we knew it was right around the corner and that would be like the next frontier in immersion in storytelling. And then I tried the Oculus DK1. I don't know when it was, so 2013, I guess. And that was the moment I was like, okay, this is it. This is the VR is already. It's still very hard to use it. There was no software really, like the hardware was really hard to get, and it was just the game engine were fully ready for it. So I started doing 360 film by taping GoPros together and like going out there and making 360 movies. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I did a documentary in Iraq during the war called The Sun Ladies, which is a documentary about a group of women who escaped captivity under ISIS and decided to join the army and fight back to liberate their sisters. So that really changed my life. So I filmed that in 360. That premiered at the Sundance Film Festival here in the US. And that was a very, very successful documentary. It was produced by Maria Bello and co-directed by my friend Christian Steven. So after that, I started doing my own thing. So before I was very much a technician. I was working for other people to tell other people's stories. And with the Sun Ladies, it was time for me to switch to being a director and telling my own stories. And from that moment on, so Sun Ladies was premiering in 2018. Wow, that was already 6 years ago, gosh. And then I got contacted by Oculus. So by then, Oculus had been acquired by Meta. As you know, it was 2014. And they had this program called Oculus VR for Good, where they were helped put together a project in VR that would raise awareness for important causes, like social good causes. And they asked me to direct a piece about the refugee crisis. And that became a piece called The Key. The Key premiered Tribeca. It's a festival in New York, and went on to a lot of festivals, and we won a lot of really big awards. That was an incredibly successful piece that is available for free on the Meta store still today. If you go and you tap The Key, you'll find it. It's free. It's still widely successful. And The Key was interesting because it was the first time I was doing game engine-based interactive storytelling. So that means it's all animation, it's all made in a game engine, and you interact with the story. So it was interesting going from completely passive, flatty, as we call them, experiences, which are movies and short films, to immersive 360 3D stories, but still passive, and then interactive VR experiences, which was The Key. And after that, I did Fight Back. And after that, more recently, I launched the next stage in my career, which is a video game. So now it's like ultimate interactivity in the VR immersive field. And that's Masters of Light, the game that was just released a month ago.
Yeah, I just tried it. It's amazing, actually. It's super active, and I can definitely recommend it. But before we go a little bit more into Masters of Light, I think this transition that you just talked about from creating experiences to creating gaming, what has changed for you, maybe in your workflow, in your approach to VR? Where do you see the main differences?
Well, it's completely different, right? Because first of all, coming from the film industry, I was used to certain tools, like going to physical places with a camera, staging everything, directing actors. And then you have the post-production workflow where you use like editing suites and VFX, etc. And then suddenly switching to a world where you basically do everything in front of a computer, right? Animation, game engine work, etc. That transition has been fascinating to me because I love learning new tools. It was a bit scary at first because I have a very European mindset, which is, I mean, that's my view of it. But I think in Europe and in France in particular, we go to school for something, right? I went to film school, and that's what you're supposed to do, right, for your rest of your career. And if you just decide to change career, you go back to school and you get trained or something, right, in school, and then you can change your career. So when I had that idea of making a video game, I actually went to pitch a different video game companies here in LA. And one of the person told me one day, I was like, you're pitching this game, it's a great idea. You're using game engine, you did The Key. Why are you not making a video game? And I'm like, well, because I never learned, like, I don't know how to do. And that person, who was American, said in a very American way, like, well, you don't need to go to school. You can just go do it. Like, you can go on YouTube or whatever, but like, you have already done all those things. So you have all the skill set. And the most important one is arguably knowing how to tell a good story, right? And so I was like, And at that point, I've been in America for like 7-8 years. So I was already kind of switching to the American mindset, I guess. But I decided to go and start my own video game studio with my partner, Marie Blondiot. So it's interesting. Like, it's not only just switching from linear passive experiences to interactive immersive experiences, but it's also swapping mindset to, hey, you haven't been to school for this, but you can still figure it out. You can try at least.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. No, I definitely agree with you when it comes to that certain European mindset that you spoke about. It's kind of getting more and more fluffy, I would say, right, with the digitalization and the possibilities to exchange on many, many levels. But I'd say it's a lot. Yeah, it's that academia kind of, right? That academia mindset, whereas it's more the entrepreneurs that are more in the States, and they just do. And when they fall, they just
and
get
they
up
are
and
unafraid, to like, okay, like for example, just Oculus coming to me in 2018 after I did Sun Ladies. So at that point, I've only done like cinematic VR. We call it cinematic VR, with film with camera. But they were unafraid to trust me and tell me to do a game engine interactive piece, which is completely out of my niche, right? Completely outside of my my alley. But they didn't care, right? And so in Europe, my perception is that, especially in France, we tend not to really give people chances to do things outside of the box, and we don't really try to trust them with stuff they haven't done before. They have to like prove that they've done it multiple times and it's successful before we trust them. So that's part of that difference of mindset that you're. And I'm very grateful I got to experience this kind of opportunity, right? And I don't think I would have gotten it back in the days in France. Hopefully it's changing now.
Yeah. I mean, the one advantage that you and all the other creators for VR have out there is that it's such a new medium. And there's not so much use cases, so to speak. There's not so much roads that have already been conquered. So as we move on, we kind of develop and we search and research and see for ourselves. But I guess in general, what you talked about, yeah, there is that situation in Europe. What about a community, a female community for VR in LA where you are? Is there a thriving community, and do you have other?
I believe so. So for years, especially in the early years of VR, there was this group called Women in VR, and we would like meet. There's a Facebook group, but we also meet in person at different events. And it felt to me, especially coming from the film industry, that it is pretty bad on a lot of different aspects, but sexism, etc., as being one of them. And getting into the VR community has been amazing. It was very welcoming. It was very diverse, it felt very diverse and very open. Also, we have to say that looking back, there was not that much money in it, right? So there's also that, back in the early days of video games, there were a lot of women, like actually computer science in general had a lot of women. I'm talking, 30 years ago, back in the very first early days of programming and such. And then suddenly became this massive industry and like generated a lot of revenue, and the women were bullied out, right? So in VR, I haven't seen it happen yet, but there is a possibility that, if we become this like massive industry that everybody is saying for the past 10 years that we're going to become, there's still a possibility that the woman will be bullied out or just not be offered the same opportunities. But so far, it's been a great environment for women to thrive. I know a lot of very successful women in the VR space. Is it harder to be a woman? Yeah, because you always have to kind of prove, you have always to make more effort to prove that you know what you're doing, and that yes, it's a new technology and it looks like super high tech and complicated, but so we always have to prove more, like that. Yes, no, I know this programming language. Yes, no, I know how to use this software. And yes, I understand VR. And yes, I've been successful at doing VR. And so that's a bit annoying, but it is what it is.
Yes.
Now, having released a video game and transitioning from VR at large into more video game focused, especially as a video game studio founder, that's slightly different. Like I remember going to an event at GDC, which is a big video game focused event at San Francisco once a year. So we went to GDC with my co-founder Marie, and we go to that VR specific event, but it's a video game conference. It's not VR, it's video game. And then there was this VR event within it. And we show up. And I remember like climbing down the stairs. It was like in a basement or something. And looking at the sea of people, it was packed. And I could maybe see 4 or 5 women in the crowd. And I was like, whoa, this is very different from what I've been used in the VR industry the past 10 years, which has been quite diverse environment. So yeah, a video game is not there yet, but I really hope there will be more and more women joining the space for sure.
Me too. That's also part of why we're sitting together today
Yep.
and talking. Speaking of Masters of Light, in our prior talk, you spoke about 3 pillars. Can you tell us a little bit more about the 3 pillars that you talked about and how you specifically maybe even kind of applied them to Masters of Light?
Sure. In video games, but probably in every project we should be doing this, not just video game. It's very often we try to figure out what are the pillars of the game. So that means usually there are 3, but you can have 2, you can have 4, whatever. But what are the principles around which everything will revolve? Like, so once you've established this principle that core to your project, every decision will be made making sure that we are one of those pillars are being focused upon, right? So it could be game mechanics, of course, it could be environment art, it could be animation, like whatever, have to kind of like keep those pillars in mind. So when we decided which pillars we wanted for Fight Back, first of all, which is a project that came right before Masters of Light. It's a social good project that is available for free also on the Meta store. And those pillars stays the same in Masters of Light. The first one was beauty, and it can sound very large, but we wanted the game to look amazing. We want people to be wowed by it and feel like they are in a space that is gorgeous, both visually and in the soundscape of it, and that they feel just in awe. That was important for us also because of the target audience that we wanted to focus on, and I'm going to talk about that later. So a lot of VR games and apps out there don't look very good. Sometimes it's a choice and sometimes it's not a choice. I don't know, maybe they don't care. Or they kind of all look the same, like low poly, what we call low poly, so very like geometrical shape, pastel colors. Like it's kind of, a lot of games look just the same. There is also a very good reason why, which is optimization and performances. VR headset basically run on a mobile chipset, right? Like the same chip that is in your smartphone. So there is only so much you can do. You can't have the look of a AAA game on a PlayStation, for example. It just doesn't work. So, but we wanted to really push that envelope. We wanted to do a game that people, like expert would be, how did they manage that on a Quest? You know, as like, we wanted to look amazing. The second pillar for us was physicality. And physicality comes from the fact that we are making a game that utilizes hand tracking. Hand tracking is what? Is you don't have to use controllers while playing this game. You can put the controllers down on the Quest 2 or the Quest 3, and it will look at your hands, detect your hand, and you can play the entire game just using your hands and using magical powers that you acquire in the game. And so that makes the game physically active. You're engaged in it. Your body is the controller. So that was a very important pillar for us. And the last one, which personally I think is the most important, is called, we call it either confidence or empowerment. And that's the feeling we want people to have when they play the game. When we did Fight Back is basically a introduction to empowerment self-defense. So basic technique of self-defense that is designed for vulnerable communities. It could be women, could be kids, could be people who are just victim of violence or targeted in one way or another. So when we designed Fight Back, knowing that most of the people that is going to play our game will most likely be VR beginners and definitely not gamers, because we use this experience. We go to like community centers and women's shelters, and we use this VR app to raise awareness about the benefit of self-defense. So it was important that we design it in a way that make people feel powerful. And this is simple things. For example, the game over, right? In a lot of video games, you die or something, and then you go to game over, and it could be very violent, or it could be very like negative, a lot of negative feelings associated with that. Because of one of our pillar was confidence, we decided to design game overs in a way that doesn't feel like a downer, like it doesn't feel like you did something wrong.
That is very true,
You are
actually.
encouraged.
Yeah, it's the opposite. And I'm motivated to restart and to say, wait a second, give me another round. That's
Totally.
wonderful. Yeah, you
And
definitely nailed that.
in Fight Back, so the project, we don't even have a game over. We have this kind of like thing. It's called a healing zone, where you can like just take time to regroup, because it's an active game and you might need to take, keep your get your breath back. And so it's a kind of a bubble of light that protects you, give you time to regroup, and when you're ready, you can start again. Masters of Light, it being a video game, there is an actual game over, but like what the VO tells you and what happens, just try to encourage you to, like, first of all, feel good about it and just try again, and just gives you all the encouragement that you need to start again.
I enjoyed that specifically because it's exactly what you just said. In many other games, there is this feeling that I'm powerless, and I couldn't do it for whatever reasons. With Masters,
you're
of
not
Light,
good enough, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a beauty. In general, the feeling I have while I'm in it, and also when I take off the goggles, is truly one of empowerment. And I'm more on the side of into VR as a medium for experiences, but I enjoyed this game a lot. And so you created something within the structure of virtual reality, within the medium, that is a game, and yet at the same time it's also an experience to me. It's not completely black or white, and that's what I love about it very, very much. So what I would definitely recommend to the listeners is do Fight Back first. It's a very nice intro also for Masters of Light. And there are 5 amazing female characters that I meet in Fight Back. Just from my side, because I'm curious, how did you find the stories, and how did you find those 5 women in particular? I am guessing they are based on true characters.
Oh, absolutely. They are historical characters. So yeah, in Fight Back, you go on a journey to liberate your sisters from entities of darkness that are called the shadows. But the shadows are not exactly what you think. There's a nice little reveal at the end that you discover when you finish. Fight Back is about half an hour long, to give some context. So it's pretty short. You can play it in one go. Your sisters that you liberate from your constellation have identities that you discover at the end, and yes, they are real historical character. We did a lot of work trying to go through history and find historical figures of women who fought back for their rights in very varied ways, very different way from each other, and also different period of time, and also different places on Earth. Right, we wanted to show like a diverse approach to the notion of fighting back as women. And so we had a long list of really, really interesting characters. What's also interesting is a lot of those incredible women, what nobody has heard about them. They kind of like got lost in history somehow, where you can probably name a lot of men heroes, right, over the course of history. Well, there were a lot of female heroes. We just don't remember them. And so, yeah, we had to go through a process of selection to find 5 that were fighting for different reason in a different way on different continents and different period of time. So we can show a very broad idea of what fighting back means. So we have an incredible woman. So 4 of them are dead because they were from different part of history, all the way from back from ancient Greece. From one of them was Telesilla of Argos, who defended her city, the city of Argos, against the Spartans, like the Spartan army that everybody know. Well, there is this city that resisted, and the defense were led by this woman, and the woman in the city called Telesilla. She was a poet, actually. So all the way from ancient Greece to now, because one of the 5 characters is actually a woman that I personally met, and she's still alive. And she's an incredible woman from Kenya. And her name is Florence. So she lives in Kibera, which is a slum outside of Nairobi. And she is a karate granny. The karate grannies are a group of women from Kibera and actually Korogocho as well, different parts around Nairobi. There's those group of women who are elderly women who've been targeted by attackers and rapists because of that weird belief that if you rape an old woman, you won't get AIDS for some reason. So anyway, it's pretty horrible. So those women who are like 60, 70, sometimes 80 years old decided to get together and learn karate and defend themselves. And so they call themselves the Karate Grannies. And actually, since they started doing that, the rate of rape was dropped significantly in their neighborhood. So that's a way of fighting back that is really badass, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
So,
you also, when you get out of fight back, you also have. I had this feeling, and I was. The beauty about that piece for me was that I felt to be part of that community, that I could do that too. So you managed
the sisterhood,
beautifully, to create that there. And then,
and by the way, we talk a lot about that, but the experience fight back is completely compatible with anyone who is not a woman. It has this female energy to it, this female kind of approach, but it's very much open to anyone. And I've seen a lot of men play it, and they love it. So,
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, this brings me to my next question. In terms of when we create virtual reality and we have a certain target audience in mind, right? How much was there a situation for you, also with Masters of Light, in terms of that you wanted to have a specific target audience, or that you felt, the 3 pillars that you just talked about now, that you wanted your target audience, whoever they are, to speak to those 3 pillars?
Right. Sure thing. So for Masters of Light, which is a video game, and it's an action fighting game, so it's a genre that would be a very fun one, magical one, because you have those superpowers with the hand tracking and such. So it's more like feeling like a superhero than boxing, right? It's not close combat boxing style. It's more magical combat. But it's a genre that is still very much usually marketed towards men. And we wanted to keep it more open. Like, we wanted both men and women to love the game and have fun playing it. So the 2 pillars of actually all 3, like physicality, confidence, and beauty, are 3 pillars that would potentially appeal to the female audience, right? They are pretty big in VR, playing games such as like fitness or written games. There's a lot of women playing those games. So it was important for us to try to appeal to this audience, while at the same time giving some robust combat mechanics and some good challenge. So we also added 3 layers of difficulty. So when you play the game, and you can change at any time, but when you begin the game, we ask you to choose a difficulty level. and it goes from kind of normal to difficult and to really hard. And so you can also pick your challenge, right? So we knew our target audience was going to be mid-core gamers, so that's kind of in between the casual gamers and the hardcore gamers. So it's kind of like that middle range. And we tried to do our best to appeal to anybody who likes Beat Saber or Pistol Whip or Thrill of the Fight. So kind of like between written game and fighting games.
And what I specifically, I realized that during me playing the game, that even though, you know, I'm immersed in the environment, at some point, I needed to become aware of my body and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I enjoyed that very much. It was fighting meets dancing meets kind of, I don't know, a very fun, active way of also expressing without being a totally, you know, you have to do this now and then you do this. And it was just very fluent, kind of the stages went very fluently into each other. So I'm definitely going to play more of that one.
Thank you. Yeah, also a lot of effort was put into designing the tutorials for the game. So how we teach, because you're right, it's like your body is the controller. You don't push buttons. You use your own hands and your body. So designing a tutorial for this game was not a traditional video game tutorial. It was more like a dance class. Yeah, in a sense of like, all right, you need to. So how do we do this? Well, we need a character to show the gesture because we have mirror neurons in our brains that are specifically for this. So to see something and do the exact same thing. So we have to activate those neurons somehow. So that means the character showing the gesture a couple of times and then explaining it. And then finally, if you need it, you even have what we call the ghost hands, which is just like if it was your own hands in front of you doing the perfect move. And all you have to do is kind of like place your hands at the same place and in the same way and do the gesture. So we had to design those layered tutorial that felt very much like teaching martial arts or teaching a dance class. That was really interesting, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I imagine. Also, the testing phase was probably very interesting, right? You must have learned a lot during that one.
So much play testing, so much, like way more than a regular game, I would say, just because we had to take into account different people with different bodies doing different, like having a different understanding of their own bodies. And so from people who are like martial arts, like black belt, like me, who can like see something once and like get it, all the way to people who have never used their bodies in that way. And so much play testing. And also hand tracking is finicky for those of you who know this technology. So it uses on the front side of your Quest device, you have your cameras. And so those cameras are seeing your hands. And then the software tries to understand where the hands are, what they're doing, which gesture they're doing to unlock different effects. And that could be complicated if you don't have enough light in your room, for example, or not enough contrast between your hands and your background. So, for example, me, I am fair-skinned, and if I play in front of a beige wall, like flat wall, the software will get confused because it won't be able to see my hands against a background that has the same color. So we have to take all of those things into account to try to design the game in a way that would work for most people most of the time.
Also, the one thing that I enjoyed is it's a piece that you can play in a group of people and you can have fun, the person who is in the game as well as the person who watches or the people who watch around that. Because I love when, even though it's not a multiplayer game itself, but it can be one if you just invite your group of friends and you have the one person that plays it and the other one, they have fun just watching the body positions, because there is something happening with you and your body while you're playing it and the other people can see it. So that's beautiful. And
it's actually funny to see different fighting styles. You have people, I've seen people play Masters of Light like super intense and like sweating bullets and like really like hitting, and I'm like, whoa. And I've seen some people who are like completely like maybe even sitting down and just doing those little moves, right? It's a very different fighting style. It's actually quite funny.
Yeah, totally. I exactly. That's why I think it's really beauty to have it with friends and to see how they kind of deal with it. So we're kind of coming to an end for this episode. But I just got myself like to the next question. And multiplayer wise, is there something maybe in your head? Would you like to go in that direction in the future? And if so, do you want to share maybe something that you have in mind in terms of where you want to go next?
Yeah, so we have a few updates that are planned by the end of the year on Masters of Light. The first one that I'm excited about, it's a small one, but it's there's been on the market for some time now a haptics solution, so like a vest that has haptics and gloves. And because Masters of Light being like a superhero magical power fighting game, being compatible with those solution is super interesting to us. So you can really like feel in your, when you do the magical powers, you feel it in your hands. When you get hit by your enemy, you feel it on your body. So that's gonna bring the immersion to the next level. So I'm really excited about working on this. We'll have new levels as well, and like a few new features, that leaderboard, etc. When it comes to multiplayer, this is something I really dream about, and I would love to bring multiplayer to to Masters of Light. However, the game has not been designed for it originally, so that means it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time to make it happen. Even a big company like Beat Saber, it took them a long time to make it multiplayer because it wasn't designed for it. I mean, that's my interpretation of it. And we are definitely a much, much smaller studio than the people who did Beat Saber and got acquired by Meta since. So we will see. We will try. This is really something I want to try doing. We just don't know yet if it makes sense financially for us to be doing this. So, but a lot of people are asking for it, and I really think it would make the game 1,000 times more intense. So yeah, we are studying that possibility.
Amazing. I think so too. I keep my fingers crossed. See where the journey goes, and maybe we'll talk in one year or something like this, and then you already have some news or update or
oh, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and for playing the game.
Of course, Celine. Have a great day, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.